Week 7 loaded with a ton of great matchups in college football. Mark Rogers TV getting you set from the betting angle with Peter Loshak from Sports Book Review. And let's get started, Peter. Thanks so much for joining us. On Thursday night, we've got what some would consider possibly an elimination game for the college football playoff with UCLA hosting Stanford. Both teams had the bye last week, so they've had time to gear up for this one, and both at 4-1.
Yeah, well, obviously, Stanford has all the momentum on paper, but we've seen in the Pac-12 that it's generally pretty profitable to expect the unexpected and to make bets that seem like the wrong side. I did preview this game already with a professional handicapper, famous guy Al McMorty from BigAl.com. He liked UCLA. That was his pick in this one. He likes it quite a bit, and I would say that I have to agree with him. Obviously, Stanford has legitimate edges. The senior quarterback in a primetime game, physical run game. So, if Stanford gets a double-digit win here, that wouldn't be a surprise. My sense is, though, that UCLA is the right side. I think at +7, I would bet it.
Okay, Peter, moving on to Saturday, we've got a couple of overachievers in the Big Ten with Iowa now 6-0, who could possibly be a favorite in the rest of its games, having cleared Wisconsin, going to Northwestern, and, of course, the Wildcats coming off that demolition at Michigan, 38-0 last week. And this is pretty much a pick 'em. I see Iowa at -1.
Actually, the line has moved now. I'm seeing it's +2.5 for Northwestern across the market. And yeah, my initial lean last week was to Northwestern, but then I started to back off it later on in the week. Northwestern, it's a tricky team. They have a really stupid offensive game plan. They need to open things up offensively, and if they did, I think they would get a lot of benefits, especially against teams like Iowa. Maybe not necessarily against elite defenses like Michigan. My sense is that this is a bounce back spot for Northwestern. Also, Iowa is very banged up on both sides of the ball. They've got a lot of minor and major issues. Northwestern does have some talent. Maybe they're not an elite level team, but I think they are a capable team at this level, and I see it as a bounce back spot for Northwestern. I did bet this one. I bet half on the money line and half on the +2.5. I think that's a reasonable bet. Although certainly, if Northwestern maintains their incredibly predictable offense, they might get shut down again. But I think it's worth a bet that they win this game.
Peter, a game that's receiving all sorts of hype, and definitely a game that I need to see if I can only see one game this week. It's Michigan State. And if you would have said at the beginning of the season that Michigan's going to be a substantial favorite, and then added on to that Michigan State's still going to be undefeated, but Michigan's still going to be a substantial favorite, that would have been hard to believe.
Yes, that's right. Let's see where the line. Wow, the line is now 8 or 8.5 market wide. Most places are hanging 8.5. Listen, Michigan it's very impressive what Harbaugh's done. Michigan State is also banged up on both sides of the ball, but this is a rivalry game. I do think that this is, the strongest defense the strongest offense that Michigan will have faced this year. Michigan's obviously also the strongest defense by far that Michigan State has faced this year themselves. I'm probably going to stay off this game just because it scares me a little bit, but my sense is that in rivalry games like this, you take the big under. I mean, we saw the same situation with the Red River rivalry last week, right? Texas looking like a disaster on the field, came out of nowhere and got that impressive win against and it's just, I think that we have the same thing here. I'm not saying I'm going to bet it, but I'm saying if I had to, I would take Michigan State at +8.5.
Hey, Peter, let's stay in the Big Ten. Ohio State, similar to Michigan State, the big favorite early in the season, preseason, and has underachieved, but still the record is perfect at 6-0. Penn State, a bit of a different play than Michigan in that they're on the road, and then also they have not looked impressive, although they have ripped off 5 consecutive wins against lesser opponents. So the big first test for Penn State, and to a lesser extent, probably the biggest test to date for Ohio State, as what I see as a 17-point favorite, the latest line I saw in this game in Columbus.
Yeah, this is just a judgment call. Obviously Ohio State has been one of those classic overrated, top teams. We've seen this many times before. We're seeing with TCU this year. We saw it with Florida State in recent years. There's Ohio State 6-0 straight up at 1-5 against the spread. Then again, though, they could easily get a blowout win here over Penn State. It's, to my eye, a coin flip as to what's going to happen. My gut tells me that it's more likely that Ohio State actually does get a blowout win than another straight up win, but ATS loss. It feels like a coin flip to me. I'm sure that some people smarter than me would have a read on this game that there's good value one way or another. I'm going to pass on it for now as far as the side's concerned. I might do something with the total, but as far as a bet on the spread, feels like a coin flip game to me.
We continue to see really good matchups in the Big 12 because everybody has to play each other. And this week we have West Virginia going to Baylor to take on the Bears. Baylor has yet to be stopped by anyone. West Virginia coming off a very difficult loss at home against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Of course, this is a big revenge spot for Baylor. My sense is that here. Let me just make sure I review my notes so I don't miss any of the things that I wanted to say about this game. This is basically a tough one. It's obviously a revenge spot for Baylor. My sense is that West Virginia's battle tested enough to stay within 3 touchdowns, but it's definitely one of those situations where Baylor's not going to be a little bit complacent or overlooking them here. So, a blowout win by Baylor would not be a surprise either. This is very similar in my estimation to the Ohio State game. Again, as far as the spread's concerned, it's going to be a pass for me. There's a lot of college football games I'm liking this week. This is not one of them. Blowout it could go down to the wire, or we could see a statement win by Baylor for sure.
2 just enormous games in the SEC. Let's first stop at Kyle Field, Texas A&M hosting Alabama. The Aggies, much overrated based on their early season success. Last year went to Tuscaloosa, got blown out 59-0.
Yeah.
But appear to be a more solidified on defense this year. They've already beaten 3 quality clubs in Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Arizona State. Taking on Alabama, the Tide is right in the ship after the Ole Miss loss as what looks to be about a 4-point favorite on the road at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think that the bye and the fact that Texas A&M, has the home field advantage here, it's a massive stadium. It's going to be an electric environment, is a huge advantage to Texas A&M. So I definitely wouldn't be jazzed to jump all over Alabama as a small favorite here. The side scares me a little bit, but I did bet the over. I think that we're going to see. I have a pretty good read in general on Alabama totals. I like the under in the Arkansas game, and here I did bet the over. If Texas A&M is going to win this game, they're going to do it in the passing game, and even if Alabama shuts them down partially, which I think they will, Texas A&M will be productive, I think, on offense in their passing game to at least a certain degree, and Texas A&M's defense obviously is much improved, but I don't think they're going to be able to contain Alabama completely. We saw what happened with Alabama's game against Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a somewhat similar game plan to what Texas A&M does every week. That game went very high scoring, and I think the over probably going to be a good bet, and I did bet that one at 53.
Another elite matchup of 2 of the top 8 teams in the country as we stay in the SEC, with Florida going to LSU. I was a bit surprised, Peter, that once Will Grier went down, certainly not an elite quarterback and a freshman, but a quarterback who has stabilized the position and played better than anyone there in Gainesville since Tim Tebow in 2009. The spread initially only moved a point when it was announced that he would be suspended. And considering Treon Harris has experience, but it's not very successful experience, and they go to LSU where Leonard Fournette against that front 7 of Florida. That is the marquee matchup maybe of the weekend, with the Gators going to LSU.
As far as the bet's concerned, Florida is actually 5-1 against the spread, and their defense, when you have that strong of a defense, a lot of times, especially as a big underdog like this, you can get undervalued. So maybe I'd lean towards Florida, but I can almost guarantee you I'm not going to be betting the side on this one. As far as the total is concerned, I would be leaning towards the under, but the market hasn't released an under. Maybe it's up now, but the last time I checked, there wasn't one. It's probably going to be a pat. Let's see. 46 or 46.5 is up right now. I'm going to look into it more. I would lean towards the under. And as far as the side's concerned, it would be a pass. Obviously, with the defenses involved and the likely offensive game plans, the under seems like at first glance probably a decent play.
Okay, Peter, I'd like to take 2 stops in the Pac-12 with Arizona State going to Utah. The Utes continue to roll. They had a fairly close game with Cal, although they had the lead for most of the game. They're 5-0, a pretty substantial favorite at home against Arizona State.
Yeah, I'm seeing 6.5 or 7 right now, unless it's moved recently. Utah actually used to be a team that had, it's kind of a big home advantage. They were undervalued at home. They're actually 1-5 against the spread in their last 12, in their last 6 Pac-12 home games. But Arizona State, we saw what happened to them earlier in the year when they went up against tough teams. They had some serious issues. Last 2 games were better, but turnovers had a lot to do with that. They fixed their turnover issues in their last 2 games. I'm not convinced that that's going to be a long-term fix. And Utah, of course, has a very opportunistic defense. In general, it makes me nervous to take favorites in the Pac-12, but I do like Utah here, and I did bet them at 6.5. Not huge. If it loses, I'll be willing to eat it. But my sense is that the problems that we saw from Arizona State against good teams, against quality teams earlier in the year, are going to pop up here on the road at Utah.
Seems as though we're seeing more upheaval in the coaching ranks at mid-season in recent years than we have at any other time. USC, Notre Dame, great traditional matchup, but the motivation factor definitely has to be a question mark in regards to the Trojans. Do they come out fired up and ready to prove something, or are they going to shut things down going to South Bend?
Yeah, USC's having a lot of issues, and not just with the Sarkisian stuff. I mean, also their star center is gone for the year. That's a big issue. But then again, in a rivalry game like this, where you have a coaching change like that, you never know how a team's going to rebound and or how they're going to respond. It's entirely possible that USC could come in here and gather the troops and get an outright win. It's entirely possible. It's also not a great spot for them because they do have a big Pac-12 game coming up next week. This isn't a conference game, so they might just mail it in for this one and try to rally for next week. My sense is that this is all about motivation and psychology, and it's a little coin flippy. You could make a good case for either side. It's going to be a pass for me, but I certainly wouldn't talk anyone off of betting either side here. My sense is that it's not a good spot for USC, despite the fact that it could be a bounce back spot for them.
We bring in Peter Loshak every week from Sportsbook Review to give you the best betting advice midweek going into the big games of college football for the weekend. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, anytime. Thanks.